Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. I've got with me today Dan Finnell, who is Director of Sales at Mind Matrix. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm good, Nikki. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about the subject that we're talking about today. It's only mildly cloudy here in Austin, so that always kind of puts a smile on my face when it's not like raining. But guys, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects. You guys have heard me talk many a times on this program about sales and marketing alignment. Dan's going to talk to us about the importance of aligning sales and marketing, which you've heard before, but he's just going to give us his take on some specific actionable things that people can take a look at just to make sure that they're on the right track when it comes to that. But first, Dan, I would love it if you would just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Mind Matrix have been up to these days.
Sure. So thank you again for allowing me this opportunity. So, yeah, my name is Dan Finnell. Mind Matrix is a Pittsburgh-based company. So we sit here in Pittsburgh. I have about 20 years of sales experience. So I come from a long line of knocking on doors and making phone calls to where we're at today in the digital age. So there's been a lot of change career-wise just within sales. And I'm kind of culminated everything here at Mind Matrix, because what we do here is we take everything from, the beginning of the buyer journey all the way to the end of the close of sale and everything in between. We collect all that data. We help the sales person or the sales company understand what the buyer's going through to help them close their sales and help them sell more. So, as a company, that's kind of what we do. Our whole goal is to help companies sell more.
It's a good goal, if ever there was one. I like how you keep it simple.
That's me, man. I'm never the smartest person in the room. So that's the simpler, the better.
Right? I like it broken down for me. So so along those lines, what has to happen, right, if companies are going to sell more, and folks are waking up to this, which is why so many people are having this conversation, is that, yes, marketing and sales have to be aligned. And the more that sales orgs open their minds and hearts to the responsibility that marketing bears when it comes to this and why, I think the better off folks are going to be. Talk a little bit about that for us, Dan, about the responsibility that marketing bears on sales and why that is.
So today, in the environment that we're in, marketing is really responsible for selling, and the buyer will walk themselves 75 to 80% through the sales process before they'll even talk to a sales rep. So when I started almost 20 years ago, I could just knock on doors and I could pick up the phone and call, and people would answer the call and they would invite you in because they needed to gain knowledge. And they wanted to understand, they wanted to get educated. They wanted to understand your products and services, where the buyer today is way busier, and there's so much more knowledge that they can just get at their fingertips. So they're way informed, more informed than they've ever been. They're researching your company. They're researching your competitors. They'll even research your sales reps. And the key is to have, that relevant web presence, social media presence, because like I said, the role of marketing's changed. So marketing needs to help the sales rep get that presence. And like I said, they're really responsible for selling more than just, marketing the product like they were, 10 years ago. They're really responsible for getting that buyer journey beginning, lead gen activities. So that's kind of like the way I see it, just because of the change in the buyer themselves.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I like that you talked about how it even at the individual contributor level, even when we're talking about individual sales reps, yes, you're right. Buyers are researching sales reps. And the more that the biggest, I think, evangelists, right, that a marketing team and their efforts can have in a sales org is the individual contributor salespeople. I mean, look, if you get those folks on the same page on your team when it comes to like how your efforts feed into theirs and vice versa, it's lights out. I've seen this work and I've seen it go very poorly. So I love that's where you took the conversation. Another thing that affects this whole idea is the different sales models within a company. Talk about that a little bit for us.
Sure. So I hate to harp on the past, but in the past, companies typically had their direct sales teams and their direct sales reps, and they would go out and they would perform all their different sales activities. Well, things have changed drastically. So you'd still have your direct sales reps, but you also have the channel side or the partner side, which is just exploding. Companies are really starting to ramp up what the channel side looks like. And a lot of the larger companies are even, pushing that to like 60% of their sales efforts. They're pushing towards the channel. So you have these different outlets where, before it was just the sales rep. So now you're also incorporating other things like chat. 5 years ago, chat was there, but you weren't really buying on chat. Like we sell through chat. So it's a totally different environment. So you need to have the ability to support all those different selling models, but it has to be in a clear and concise manner so that those branding standards that companies, hold so dear, those standards are still held up, whether it's the sales rep doing that, whether it's, somebody at a partner level or, online. So it's key to have that alignment through all those different models.
Yeah, so that's that consistency piece that you and I talked about offline, is the consistency of the messaging across, not just across the teams, but like you're saying, across channels, and being able to, as a marketing team, know how to adjust that and tailor that, whether we're talking about direct sales teams or channel sales teams. I love that. And so the next thing that I want folks to really understand about, what it is that you're getting at is the importance of data in this whole thing. And really what we're talking about is the type of insight that the sales team would be able to have into the buyers, not just where they are in the journey, but what their interests and habits are. Dig into that for us a little bit, Dan.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So, we're in a very data-driven society, and you can pull reports based upon anything. And I always say, the numbers don't lie. So you can really see what people are looking at, what's driving their buying decisions. And, the old adage of people do business with people that they like and trust, and it's all about relationships. Those are 100% true. They're still true today as they were, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. But because the buyer journey has changed, organizations, they need to change the way they sell and the way that they learn how to mine all that data so they can create predictable outcomes. They can create repeatable sales processes. So if, say, you're focused on, mid-sized manufacturers, create a certain type of wingnut, okay, and you've had success selling to those types of manufacturers, it's key. It's so important to be able to take the data of every aspect of the successes and the failures, mine that data, understand that data. So now going forward, you can have intelligent conversations with your prospects, and then you can truly gain their trust. Because you have an understanding of what's important to them. You have the understanding of why they're buying, what they're buying, what that cycle looks like. And you do that all through the data. So now, before it was, let's sit down, have a conversation, let me get to know you, all that, because the buyer's handling all the research on their side. You need that data to have those intelligent conversations, because sometimes your competitors are still going back to the old school methods. So it gives you a leg up on what your competitors are doing.
Yeah, and it's a significant edge, right? What's happening today, this shift that I'm happy to see in business, particularly in sales and in marketing, is this eye toward empathy. And when you tell that to an individual contributor, hey, you need to be empathetic, you need to, sometimes without data, you're setting them into conversations, having to maybe fake it or having to dig, and you're counting on these folks to know more than it might be possible for them to know going into a conversation in order to be authentically empathetic, right? But so the data, like you're talking about, is what saves them from having to just guess at what folks are going to respond to emotionally, what folks are going to respond to in terms of, how to gain their trust. And so I love that that's included in this conversation for you. And it sort of leads into this next concept, which is how do we do that specifically? How do we empower folks to go into those conversations? How do we take what we're doing with marketing, what we're doing with sales, what we're doing with data, and systematize it? And one of the ways we do that is by giving salespeople the tools and talk tracks to help guide that sales process. So give us an example of what that looks like, maybe some folks that you've worked with where you've seen that go well, or just maybe talk about the idea and why it's important to you.
Yeah. So being a salesperson, there's people think, hey, sales is the greatest ever and it's so easy and all you're doing is talking to people. Sales is extremely difficult, and we know that.
Yeah.
But others might not understand. Having tools that give you insight, maybe give you a little more of an advantage, or just having another arrow in your quiver is so key to a salesperson. And some of the tools that salespeople, when they get these things, they're like, wow, where has this always been? So little things like, what if I knew what emails you were actually looking at? I send you emails, my marketing team puts you on a drip campaign. What if I knew which emails you were truly looking at, and I knew what was gauging your interest? That'd be huge. So now when I have a conversation with you, my conversation can be all about the things that you looked at, instead of me just throwing up the solutions at you that you might not even pertain to your world. What if I could see that you opened up an email and then went to my website and looked at certain things, and then you filled out a form fill to request a white paper based on a specific topic. And I was able to string all those things together, and I could see that. And now that conversation, I become more of a consultant. I have a full talk track, and I can look at the data of other people that have looked at the same things that you have. I can look and see how those conversations went. What was the driving factor? Because you hit it before, Nikki. If you're not using the data and having those empathetic conversations, your conversations are solely around price. And that's just not a smart way to sell, because you're not really helping your prospect. If all you're doing is selling on price, and not using all the data, knowing what they're interested in, uncovering, aspects of their environment that maybe you wouldn't by using that data, you're going to end up selling on price. And we all know that selling on price is not the smart way to sell.
Sure. Yeah.
So providing the rep with all of those tools that they need, keeping them in the environments that they're used to. So there are tools that will keep a rep in Outlook, or if they're in a Gmail or an Office 365 environment, that'll give them all that insight. If they're in like a CRM environment all day long, there are tools that reps can, that companies can use for their reps, whether it's the direct side or the channel side. So they have full insight, and then incorporate things like playbooks. So now give that rep that what to say, how to say, when to say it within different aspects of the buying cycle. So you're kind of leading the prospect in an intelligent conversation, and you kind of see, hey, these are the things that the prospect is interested in. So let's key on those things and not the other things that they're not interested in, then you don't lose them. But there are so many tools out there that fit in with the environments that your reps are already living in, that will give them the advantage to their competitors. And the prospect would gladly have those intelligent conversations, the relevant conversations. Then, hey, here's the sales guy just calling me up and trying to get 10, 15 minutes of my time, and he has no idea what I'm interested in.
Yeah. What I think is important that you talked about, I know that a lot of the time when people talk about tools, right, we're talking about the tech stack, and that's important, right? You mentioned giving them that insight into data within the environments that they naturally are working in day to day. But the fact that you include talk tracks when you're talking about tools, I think is really key, because I think then it's systematizing and teaching salespeople how to talk about that data, which is a whole other thing in itself. There's a difference between a lot of my early work as an SDR, right? It would be what you're talking about. Someone has clicked on something, someone has downloaded a white paper, and then my job is to call them and try and initiate a sales conversation. There is a vast difference between calling and saying, hey, I see you downloaded this white paper, right? Which is still, in my opinion, a very transparent cold call, or I guess warm call, and calling them up and telling a story or talking about something that was contained in the white paper without maybe even directly referencing it, right? So call them,
exactly.
Hey, I'm Nikki from such and such. So this is a problem that I've been helping a lot of people, or that we, help a lot of people with. I talked to a lady last week, and God, she was just up to her elbows in XYZ, right? So having the conversation, teaching folks how to have the conversation in a way that's engaging and that's real and tells a story that goes beyond just referencing the piece. Because that's another thing, right? In some organizations, sales and marketing alignment is just that process I talked about, right? Marketing puts out the content, and then sales looks at who's engaging with the content as far as guiding who they will try to initiate conversations with. And that's of course important, but that's just the beginning. And so then if somebody at the organization is not teaching these salespeople how to have the conversations around the content, the marketing's going to be frustrated naturally, because they're like, look, we're putting out this good content and it's going nowhere. They're telling us, the sales team is telling us they need more air cover, right? More support. We're giving it to them and it's falling flat. And then the sales org is frustrated because, they don't understand how to talk about the content. So that you include talk tracks and tools is huge. You're a man after my own heart. I'm so glad that you came to talk to us about this very important subject today. But now that I have picked your brain successfully and gotten a little bit of insight as far as getting things out of it, it's time for you to tell me what you're putting in it. So Dan, what learning resources are you engaging with? What are you reading? What are you listening to that's got you excited these days?
Sure. So I'm like a social butterfly. So I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I will go out, I hit the streets, I go to as many networking events, regardless of the topic, just to soak it in. So that's the type of learning I do. I do a lot of in-person networking, have conversations, deep conversations with people. And then my ride in is an hour to work and an hour home. So podcast after podcast. So you name it, your podcast. There's a couple local Pittsburgh podcasts that I listen to. So that's the thing that I do. I have two children, so reading really isn't an option at this point. So my free time is around them. But every chance I get to be out and about, to learn from, the people that are out, the business leaders here in Pittsburgh. We have a huge tech scene right now, a lot of growth, a lot of big hitters coming to Pittsburgh. So it's cool to learn from them. And that's what I do. I highly encourage people to find different networking events, find a mentor too, to go out and hang out with and have deep conversations with them, and just get to meet people and understand what their business is.
You know what? You're the first person to give that answer. I've had folks say mentors, but I've not ever had anybody talk about networking events as a learning resource. And it's something I really believe in. I'm that girl. I'm on Eventbrite. I'm trying to see who's out there, who's talking about what, and how can I be involved? And so I think that's such a really good, unique, fresh take on educational content and how to get stuff in your brain. So I know folks are going to be interested in following along with what you're up to. How can folks connect with you, Dan?
Sure. LinkedIn is the best way to do it. Just search Dan Finnell. Like I said, in Pittsburgh, Mind Matrix. And the website for Mind Matrix is mindmatrix.net. Those would be that's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Well, I'm going to go right out now and connect with you. Thank you so much, Dan. This has been great. You have a good one.
Nikki, thank you. You too. Take care.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.